What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and it is great to be back in my home office today. We've been on the road, we've been filming out and about in the field. If I would have known where today's guest was, maybe we would have done it in person too, but I didn't find that out until I did my research today. Things have been going great. We're dropping a ton of episodes for you. We're going to start getting back to 2 times a week. We've got some good people working on the show. At some point, maybe they'll come forward. We'll introduce them to you, but we got some good people working on the show. Expect episodes to drop every Monday and Wednesday-ish. We're still working on the SOPs, so Monday and Wednesday-ish, we'll drop clips for you guys. Follow us across all platforms at EYG Podcast, or sorry, EYG Pod is the Instagram, is the TikTok, is the Twitter, EYG Pod. Of course, you can always find us at the Cannabis Lab and then at joinclab.com. Check us out in 3 weeks. Puts us to the third week in September. We're going to be live events in Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. Certainly check those out. We got some other great events coming up. joinclab.com. Folks, my guest today has a very, very important job in the industry because he's the Chief Technology Officer of probably one of the most important technology companies in the cannabis space. As soon as I mention the name of the company, you guys will know who it is. So please welcome Sam Peterson, the Chief Technology Officer of METRC. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Todd. Thanks for having me on today. Really excited for the chat.
Absolutely. No pressure. So Sam, here's my issue. I want to talk to you about the cannabis industry and cannabis and all that stuff. But the problem is my pedigree, my training from 10 years of enterprise IT sales. I just want to pitch you on Office 365. It's a terrible habit.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately we're already under contract. I guess that we're primarily a Microsoft shop over here at METRC. So I think
good thing
you're
I
already
left that
there.
life behind like 8-9 years ago. But I came up in the world of enterprise IT. So when someone asked me, you want to talk to a chief technology officer, I started having PTSD again. So, but I'm excited, man. You guys sit at the center place of the cannabis industry, being the seed to sale tracking system for so many different municipalities and states, and then privately as well too. The METRC tags are very prominently displayed whenever you go into a cultivation facility. You've got a very deep pedigree of great technology companies behind you, Overstock, etc. What brought you to METRC? What was the crazy idea that wanted to bring you to the cannabis space?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really target cannabis, Todd. It was more, I wrapped up my last gig and was, looking for something new and exciting. And I happened to meet Jeff Wells, who's the founder, Michael Johnson, the CEO. The space is really intriguing, and I got more and more excited about it the more I chatted with them. And really, I'd say now having been on the job, I think about 9 months. It is fun being back part of an up and coming industry. It feels like, kind of the early days in the 2000s when the internet was taking off. It feels very the same with cannabis. Just a massive amount of potential, massive amount of innovation going on. Really exciting time to join.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been part of the appeal of coming to METRC, is just the opportunity to really kind of help develop the compliancy of the supply chain across an entire new industry, right? And it must be unique while you're sitting inside the walls there, just looking how you have to really take this software that is a standardization, but minutely tweak it to all the compliances across so many different municipalities.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple things on that. I mean, I was very fortunate. Already the team at METRC, they've done a very good job. It's a very robust, as you said, very complex. If you think about all the laws, rules, and regulation by state, our software solution is very much completely configurable. So it is different for California versus Colorado versus Oregon versus Michigan. So that was very exciting to see. I'd say the other thing that's exciting, Todd, is we really are, that platform. The vast majority of the transactions in METRC come via our API. And so it is very interesting, while, we build everything in our web application, everything for users to be able to go on the METRC system and manage their inventory. At the same time, we have to build all that same functionality for all of our third-party integrators. So it's really, definitely an exciting platform, exciting to see where METRC goes from here.
Sure. Yeah, you guys are really at the center of the ecosystem of the tech world for cannabis, right? Like, you know, in California, everywhere you are, every company needs to, along the entire supply chain, needs to enter their information through METRC. It tracks it all the way from seed to sale. You guys also, you know, funny enough, when I took my first cultivation tour, I learned that you guys have defined the difference between medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, and that's by making two different color tags. Crazy how that is the only difference between the two programs. But you know, it must be interesting, and I feel like this is kind of where why METRC was attracted to you and where the relationship kind of blossomed there. But as you just said, with the API into so many other pieces of technology, METRC is the center of this ecosystem. You kind of have to lead the pack when it comes to technological innovation or even just integrations and being able to speak to different platforms because everybody relies on your data so heavily.
Yeah, and it's definitely been, Todd, a tough needle to thread that I've seen, because ultimately, the states are the final decision maker, but we're trying to figure out how we partner with third-party integrators and how we adjust our API, so they have additional functionality, for them to innovate and build software on top of the METRC platform, but at the same time, keeping the states happy and making sure, we're following all the right laws and rules for regulation.
Sure. So as you look internally at METRC, you know, you would think you've got a lot of state contracts, it's in place. It's definitely the dominant market share in the industry. You know, where does the company go forward now besides just improving the product? Like, you know, how are you guys looking at the industry? Where's your focus going into what parts of the technology or the application?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we've definitely been on a hiring spree, building out the tech team. When I came in, we did not have enough resource, and definitely as we have, state contracts keep coming in, it was a time to start ramping up. And really, I think our initial big focus was just how do we get the teams in place and our process right to start iterating on a lot of the requests from the state. So now it is exciting. We're in a exciting spot where we are able to start innovating, and looking at new features and things we can build with. And a lot of that's exciting where we are sitting down with third-party integrators, asking what we need, what we can build better. And then we've got a lot of ideas for the future, and a lot of things we want to see that we're building in 2024, 2025.
Very cool. So right before you came to METRC, you were doing, I don't want to say something similar, but essentially you built a platform for boats, for boat selling and
Yeah.
boat reselling, you know. But at the end of the day, what are you doing there? You're connecting buyers and sellers, which is something you're also kind of doing in METRC too. Are you taking a lot of, you know, crazy enough, and people might say that boats, cannabis, I mean, first of all, most people on boats smoke cannabis, but that's neither here nor there. The point being is, you know, are you able to take a lot of that education experience from building that marketplace, so to say, for lack of a better term, and bringing that to METRC, because you do have so many different pieces that need to be connected between cultivators, distributors, manufacturers, retailers, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think we all try and bring our experience to our next role and what have we seen done before. But definitely a lot more similarities. You're right, Todd, in how boats are listed, how data is managed, how people think about owning those listings. It's been very similar, and just similarly a lot in similar to real estate, there are a lot of rules and regulations around contracting and, just buying and selling boats. Not nearly as complex as cannabis, but, definitely a lot we had to think through at Boats Group.
Sure. No, and now you're, you know, you're trying to be the center place of the boating world there for transactions. And here you are, it's somewhat at the center place of the cannabis industry for transactions. Like I've said over and over again, it's the software that everybody uses. So is right now, I noticed that you guys just recently launched METRC Connect. Is that where a lot of your
Yes.
focus is? And is that really just an easier platform for folks to be able to integrate with METRC?
Yeah. So since the get go, the team has had an API, which we've iterated on. This was really our first pass, Todd, at drastically improving our API. Improving, a lot of it is just responses people get back. A lot of, I would say, just when you've got an older version of software, just taking a lot of that feedback, from our third-party integrators on how do we improve things, how do we provide more verbose responses, how do we add additional calls. I think we ended up adding 30 or 40% more additional API calls to do very similar things. And then I think the other big one we added was webhooks. We had a lot of integrators, just given the nature of transactions, who would have to constantly pull the metric system, and just for performance for them and lack of load for us, getting webhooks in there is exciting. We did launch it earlier this year, and we're starting to see good. I think we've had kind of about 250 integrators, about 140 have started moving over to the new platform. So definitely exciting to see the new version of the API. And then from there, Todd, our plan is to, like everything, start partnering with those technology companies on where do we need to move the platform forward to next? What do people want next, and what is missing that we need to build for our users?
So as we fast forward through the industry starts to normal and grow and continue to scale. Does METRC end up in comparing it to the tech world being like a Salesforce.com or like a Microsoft, where you are this giant tech company, but you have this ecosystem of third-party integrators and resellers, et cetera, et cetera? Like, it's funny enough to see Salesforce.com have these giant conferences with hundreds if not thousands of resellers. I used to go to the same conferences for Microsoft too. Like, is that really where METRC stands out in this industry, where it becomes this giant platform with all of this ecosystem of partners attached to it?
No, that's exactly, you're somehow reading our email, Todd. That's exactly what we're reviewing, is just not only how do we make our API more robust, but similar in Salesforce, how do we allow tech companies to innovate and add widgets, modules inside of METRC. We really view how can we continue to be, how can we actually become more of a platform and really help that innovation. Really for us, a big piece of I think my job is we're not going to be able to build it all, and so realizing that as a company, we want to be the platform that really is where the core of traceability. But then we want to figure out how we have great partnerships with other software providers. How do we help third parties build better point of sale solutions? How do we help the cultivation side? How do we build better cultivation software together? When you kind of look at everything out there and every way you can innovate, we could try and do that, but we'd rather figure out how do we create an ecosystem that we allow several software companies to build the technology for cannabis, and instead of trying to rely on only a handful.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I've been doing this for 4.5, 5 years. I definitely have looked at the tech side of the industry just because that's where my background had been historically, but funny enough, working mostly in the plant touching side of the industry. But I feel like we've reached an inflection point, and maybe it's the capital crunch in the industry. Maybe it's the scars on everyone's back, where a lot of these tech companies, when they started, they did one thing really well. And then, and I'm not saying this specifically of METRC, I'm saying it in general of most of the tech companies that came into the cannabis space. They came in servicing a niche because it needed to happen, because traditional tech companies were not coming in. They crushed that niche, and then they needed to grow because they were raising capital. So they started trying to be everything to everybody. And that's very, very hard for anybody to do, to be everything to everybody. And it seems now everybody is starting to divest the businesses that didn't work out. And I don't mean to laugh at this, but they're going back in the other direction, where they're like, we need to go back to focusing on what we did really, really well, and start partnering with these other companies to create this ecosystem of software for the cannabis industry. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, if we look at any other industry, you've been in tech for a long time, I've been in tech for a long time, there's no one company in the tech world that does everything for everybody, or even 75% of everything for everybody. It's always an ecosystem of what are the best homogenous technologies that work together. And I don't know if you're starting to see that, but I get the feeling, and we might be right on the cusp of it, but I think that is something that's going to help continue to scale and normalize this industry going forward.
Yeah, no, we're definitely seeing that. And I think the most prevalent is you see that, in your point of sale software vendors there, which, luckily a lot of great companies out there. But if you just look at, the complexity of payments in the cannabis space, and then the management of a retail dispensary, that's the one area where I'm glad as METRC, we can provide a platform for retailers and dispensaries to have software like that. There's some great great products out there from Dutchy Trees, Blaze, Meadow, some great companies out there that make great solutions. And so that's when we're seeing, to your point, yes, I think all of us, as you see, cannabis is still very much up and coming. I think even myself as a technologist, some of it is you want to go make that land grab. Like, no one is doing this well. Should we go do it? And try and build it. And I think the successful companies, they're going to try a couple of those. They're going to be good at a couple things, not a couple others. I've learned the good technology companies know when to, invest heavily in a good product and cut a poor one. Even you look at the big guys, they're good at that too. You look at the Googles, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, I guess the Metas now. They kind of go after that, and so I think you are going to see that, and maybe a little bit more.
It's interesting though, but those companies have also gotten to a point now where they almost kind of do R&D through venture investing, right? And
Yep.
that would be an interesting thing to see. The problem with our industry is we all kind of need money, and everybody in some way, shape, or form. But you see the Microsofts, the Googles, the Metas of the world, they look at these technology startups, they buy a stake in them because they go, hey, this could be something that we can integrate in. We want to have a foot in the door there. And it'll be interesting when we get to a point to see that happening in the technology world where you have essentially a platform. Obviously, I think you guys would be primed for it as one of the biggest tech companies, maybe some of the POSs or payment companies too, that kind of R&D by investing. That would be a very interesting thing to start seeing in this industry because it does take a long time and it does pull focus. And unfortunately, because we are all startups, we all get excited about new projects. And it'd be interesting to see if that's a way that some of these more greener CEOs can keep their companies focused by just R&D through investment as opposed to
Yeah.
building a new division inside.
No, it's a smart strategy. I see a lot of companies doing that now. Even something, we've talked about and other of the large players out there. You look at kind of the investments as well as how acquisitive are you going to be. Still lots of opportunity, lots of growth out there. It's exciting.
Yeah, man, it's a great industry, and I think we're starting to see a turnaround. And I think the last 6 months the last 6 months of this year will be exciting. How has it been coming from the normal world into our crazy industry of compliance and nascency, and because we are at a point in time right now where we don't know if 5 years from now the industry is going to look the same, the big name players are going to be the same. Like everything is so nascent and crazy. But I think the faces that you see out in the world, the people will still be here, but the t-shirts and the hats they wear might be different. So how has this industry been? I know you've been here for a couple cups of coffee and that's it, but how has
Yeah.
your experience here compared to everywhere else?
I mean, like I said, but before Todd, it definitely feels like that early 2000s of the internet. So, we are kind of in this space. I think we're going to see, some companies go under, some companies get acquired, some mergers. But you're right, we're going to have the same people around the table. I think, what I'm kind of expecting in the next 5 years, like I think we're going to see the strong tech companies be there, float to the top. And I think to your point, we're going to kind of understand every company's niche. So that's really what, I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of the products out there that are new, that are innovative, get a lot more traction, a lot more features, and, start turning into more of, not to use the buzzword, hopefully this doesn't give you PTSD, but more enterprise software type solutions in cannabis. And then I'm hoping what we see, and I think some of them are more macroeconomic, that we see some more funding come in, so we get more of those startups coming in. That's kind of my concern is, I definitely worry about the macroeconomic situation. How easy is it for the little guy to get capital to start a business?
Yeah.
Because I still think there's a lot to build out there.
No, I agree with you, man. I think one of the things that how do I even explain this, right? Like I look at the industry right now and I feel one of the reasons why the capital infusions have almost stalled is because there's only so much private money in the country, and there's so many cannabis companies. The industry is growing that we've tapped most of it right now. And candidly, as somebody like I don't expect a whole lot to happen in legislature. Every time I see someone post about safe banking or this, that, and the other, I just expect it to fail because we've seen it happen
Yep.
way too many times, right? So, and I don't mind the way the industry is now, because I think there are so many different pockets of the industry that are getting to figure it out different ways, that at some point a preferential model should emerge where it's somebody's going to do it right, where we can look at it and say that's the one that we should base it off of, right? So, a lot of people that are pushing for federal legalization or even interstate commerce and everything else, that scares the shit out of me more, because I don't know if the government's ready to take on that project and be able to regulate it in a way that makes sense and doesn't kind of potentially hurt the industry, right? I know that sounds weird, but if you look at all these government programs that exist, a lot of times they don't do it right the first time, right? And that's because they have a bunch of people who are not tapping the right experts, or these are other conversations for other times. So my point being is, the only reason I cheer for this legislation to happen is to be able to access more capital right now, because I do believe that there is a ton of innovation happening in this industry that can also permeate out into other industries. I think there is a ton of opportunity in this industry that is just waiting to happen. But I do believe, and you're welcome to comment on this or not, but I do believe that investors are just weary right now because nobody's got their money back because of things haven't changed.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, kind of maybe addressing your couple of points. I think interstate commerce is coming quicker than we're all going to be ready. So I think I see that coming our way, and I think at METRC we're going to be prepared for it. And I think you got a lot of other big players that states out there trying to solve it. On the federal side, you're right. From an investment standpoint, I think my hope is, I would hope the federal government wouldn't take it on to decide, hey, we're gonna take on the task of regulation. I would more hope that they would figure out a path where the states still run their own show, but that we're to a point, this is no longer, I guess, illegal, for the best word, for the industry. Because I think you're right. Then I think there's a lot of capital out there that is hesitant to invest, given the federal stance on cannabis.
Yeah, man. It sucks. I remember 5 years ago I joined this industry, and I remember people saying that federal legalization was right around the corner, or 5 years away, and it's now 5 years, and it's no closer. It's still 5 years away. But the nice thing that we have going to transition into something else is, I look like I'm freezing here, but that's okay. The nice thing we have is more and more folks like yourself are starting to look at this industry as a normal industry. It's not taboo. And I'm actually curious to know that, like, you have a deep history in traditional business and sizable businesses. Some of those may be publicly traded. What did the people around you say when you said, hey, I'm going to, like, one of the number one technology companies in the cannabis industry? I'm sure you got a bunch of jokes about weed and everything else, but what was that reaction like from your network?
I didn't get as many of those jokes as I expected. I expected a similar. I think I got a lot more people excited to hear what's happening. I think for the techies I'm with and the entrepreneurs out there, this is an exciting space. When you start looking at a new market, at least for me, if you think about innovating and how are you going to go after something that could be big, the technology cannabis space is still very exciting. So yeah, I got a lot more support than I had expected. And I do think we're getting over some of the taboo as a country.
I definitely think we're getting over the taboo from the normal people that you would talk to every day. I think sometimes the media would lead you to not believe that, but that's also the point of it. I like to think that technology is a gateway industry to cannabis, because I remember tech is what gave me my education more so on cannabis. What would happen is I didn't start consuming cannabis like 22, 23, and going through the tech industry, a lot of engineers that are locked in data centers and everything else, they use cannabis. Like, I remember at one point during Christmas, when I really started getting into cannabis, I would make my engineers pot brownies every Christmas as like a thank you for helping me out throughout the year, and they loved it. So I'd almost say it was a gateway into this industry. And you're right, the folks that I worked with, like, they're the ones who still keep in touch with me and want to find out everything else. But I think it's because there was to really kind of legitimize it. It was somewhat normal in like this engineering community to leverage it because it helped a lot of these folks. You know what I mean? So like, that's when it's part of that technology culture, which is really interesting to me. So, I imagine that you wouldn't get to it. And I think we're at a point in time now where when we get someone like you, because there are so many other people like you in this industry, the average person is like, oh, I hear that's doing great. And, I used to joke on this podcast that when I first started in this industry 5, 6 years ago, I never told people what I did because I was afraid that they would judge me for what I did. Now I say the same thing. I don't tell people what I do because they're going to talk my ear off and I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, I definitely think, Todd, it's the job. You meet people, you go to events, you chat with people. I definitely think this is the first job where I tell people about it, and there's instantly just pepper with questions. I think there's just, people are really curious about the industry, which is exciting, and it's kind of fun being in a job where everyone wants to hear about what you're up to.
So
And yeah, go ahead.
no. I was gonna say, I'd love to know, like, as someone you know a thing or two about technology. You've got a few accolades under your belt. One of them, and I didn't catch this the right way. I know you were either nominated for or potentially won the CIO of the Year award this year, which is awesome either way. So, like, where are you putting most of your focus into METRC? What parts do you think deserve? Is it really just building out the team and the specialties? Is there a certain area you think needs more love than the other? Are there future thinking projects? Like, obviously, there are secrets that you can't tell, but is there anything that you
Yeah.
can share that you're excited to be working on?
I mean, it's been, right now, what we've done and what we got accomplished is really building out the tech team, and, changing to a traditional, agile Scrum software development process. So that's what we've been up to the last couple of months. Now the big thing we need to move to is we're really looking at how do we build, the platform for the future. So we're looking at all those, how do we want this looking architecture wise in the next year? That's really our next one, because we realize, you still don't have, you still only have a handful of states that are at adult use. And, if you start looking at the transaction, every state goes medical and then adult, and then the adult use takes off. If you start looking at, what we're looking at as far as Europe, as far as, like it seems like the federal is always 5 years out. Maybe we need maybe it's the right White House, Congress combination. But that's really our next one, is building the platform of the future. And then really the third thing is how do we become more of a platform company and foster that innovation? Because like you said, we've realized our place is being that platform and helping foster it, not necessarily trying to chase every little niche and every little product out there.
No, no, I couldn't agree more. I think you guys are definitely the center of the cannabis universe, specifically in this country. And I think, when we look at regulations and we look at market trends, I think there's no better source of information than METRC right now. I mean, I think and I don't know if that's how that's available to people, whether we can make it available to politicians or people shaping policy or anything else. But, you guys handle the majority, if not all, of the transactions within the cannabis space. I think if anybody wants to get a good understanding of what the cannabis industry could potentially be, it's looking at METRC and look at the growth of just users and transactions and everything else that's happened over the history of your company.
Yeah, no, the data is exciting. Definitely we're doing everything we can, to help with kind of, how do we shape the right regulations? But also it's interesting. There's so many applications to interesting data out there. I'm very excited to see, where this goes. If you start looking at just in some of the things we've started looking to be a part of, different strains, different terpenes, what's the right, the right product for you may not be the right product for me. And so there's going to be enormous data there. I keep comparing it, and maybe this is the wrong one, to wine. And that, as we start learning more about cannabis, what people like, what people don't like, I think it's even more wine on steroids. That, how do we start tracking that data? And as a consumer, how do I start knowing, this is the exact strain, product mix, so many different variables out there. I'm just excited about what we can do for the consumer.
That's my absolute favorite thing, and I completely understand why people are so into wine. And it's funny when you say maybe it's the wrong thing to compare it to. The biggest issue with cannabis is there's so many things that you can compare it to, because you can compare it to alcohol, you compare it specifically to craft beer, you compare it to wine, you can compare it to pharmaceuticals, you can compare it to nutraceuticals, you compare it to supplements, et cetera, et cetera. Like it I think that's why people think we're crazy sometimes when we talk about the things that cannabis can do. And then right now we're only talking about the consumption of cannabis. We're not even talking about the industrial use of cannabis as well too. So, I think people think we're crazy when we talk about it, but how much experience, or how much have you tried to go boots on the ground to just look at markets and see what's going on in the products there? Because that's one of my
Yeah.
absolute favorite things to do. Like, I'm going up to Atlantic City in 2 weeks for NECAN. And as much as I can't tell you how badly I don't want to go to Atlantic City because it's a dump. And if anybody's from Atlantic City, I am not taking those words back. Your city is a dump. I'm sorry. But I am excited because I haven't been to New Jersey since they legalized cannabis recreationally. So I'm really excited to see the products and the brands and everything else out there. And like you said, the innovation and the terpene profiles, and seeing even just the brands that are putting their terpenes or terpene profiles or percentages on their product. Like, I'm very excited for all of that. That's actually one of my favorite things
Yeah.
to do, no matter how pertinent it is to my job.
No, I mean, I love being boots on the ground. It's amazing that, the farms you see, just mind blowing, what's out there, but also seeing the manufacturing being done, be it, creating, vape cartridges, gummies, the amount of work into it, as well as, part of where I really like the regulated market is just how careful and precise some of these companies are with their product quality.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing seeing boots on the ground. Tomorrow I'm going to Detroit. So really excited. I haven't been to see the Detroit market or looked at it that way. I've been to Detroit. But every state, it's interesting. They do it a bit different. Products are a bit different. So I'm definitely excited this week. I am excited to be boots on the ground in Detroit, meeting with licensees, understanding the products they have, and the different nuances. Very interested in how everyone is, what everyone is doing with cannabis.
See, that to me, that would be the most fun part of the job. I actually have to get back up to Michigan. Michigan's got a great market up there. You've got some phenomenal edibles companies like the Detroit Fudge Company. They put out some great edibles. My buddy Chris from Butters up there. You've got some Michigan, to me, is the closest thing you're going to get to California, but they seem to be doing a little bit better, maybe just because, you don't have a lot of the forced distribution that California has. But again, we can get into the bad sides of the industries and other conversations. But yeah, man, I appreciate you joining the show, dude. I'm really excited to see the things that you have going forward, the changes, watching METRC continue to grow as the center of the industry, forward thinking. What can you leave folks with? What excites you about working in the industry? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I think where we're sitting is I feel like, we're kind of, from the ecosystem and the tech, I think we finally kind of got all the bases covered. So what I'm excited over the next 5 years is I think we start seeing some really crazy technology advances that make, cannabis consumption and use even more interesting. You look at the medical benefits, you look at the enjoyment recreationally. I think you're only going to see, technology help, make that so much better and so much better for the consumer.
Considering what you guys do and where you sit in the industry, I would love to see this. And you guys, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I would love to see presidential candidates reaching out to you guys to learn about the industry, to see the potential. Right now, you guys really are the compliance center for cannabis. If anyone's going to be able to scale it out, there's certainly, you guys should have somewhat of a say in it. So I would love to see people reaching out to you, your CEO, and just educating themselves on where the industry is and where it can go and how we can make it safe and compliant
Yeah.
and legal for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, we're also hoping, we'd love all the president candidates to reach out and have a discussion with us. We definitely want to, help, not only to represent ourselves, but also represent on the industry, and just have discussions about, because we do get to see, every state does it differently, and some things, and as you said, there are pros in every state and cons in every state, and we'd love to be part of, how do we shape the next 5 years.
Ron DeSantis, these guys are in your state. Go see them. Everybody else, they'll go to Tampa, I'm sure. Lakeland's a short drive. I know there's not much there. I
Yeah,
hear there's a great steakhouse if it's still the one that was there from the wrestling state championship, but
yeah, it's still there. Yeah,
it is a phenomenal
yeah. No,
steakhouse.
I'll see what I can do. We'll go have a chat with DeSantis.
Sounds good, man. Sam, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me. I definitely look forward to having you on again soon.
Yeah, would love to be on again, Todd. Thank you for your time. I was excited to be on.
Absolutely. And thank you to everybody at home. It's been another episode of Elevate Your Grind. We'll see you next time.